Again, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to get started here real soon. Encouraging everyone to open up that chat box and introduce themselves. I see some introductions starting to come in now. And to introduce myself, my name is Angie Furman. I'm the River Training Center Coordinator for River Management Society, and would just like to welcome everyone to today's session. It's our second session in the Wild and Scenic River Training Series. And today we're going to be looking at the importance of river value descriptions around wild and scenic rivers, right? So happy that you're all here. Hopefully, I see some returning faces from last time. And at the end of today, I'll talk a little bit about the next one in our series. But as we're just still kind of getting the last few people joining and connecting to audio, I want to start with a little trivia. So here on the screen, you can see it, and you can go ahead and put your answer in the chat. But the 1994 film, The River Wild, included scenes shot on 2 wild and scenic rivers, both of which have scenery ORVs, or outstandingly remarkable values. We'll go over a little bit about what those are today, but feel free to put your guesses in the chat. What are the 2 wild and scenic rivers that the River Wild was shot on? Oh, I see Galen guessed the Middle Fork Flathead and the Kootenai and the Rogue from Becky. Well, the answer is kind of a combination. It is the Flathead and the Rogue rivers. So nice job. Thanks again for guessing. And for those who are just coming in, again, my name is Angie Furman, and I'm the River Training Center Coordinator for River Management Society. Happy that you're all here today to look at the importance of river value descriptions. So just a few slides to get us kicked off today. I am recording, and I'll be sending out a link to the recording as well as a link to the PDF of the slides after I've got it all processed and loaded on our YouTube channel, probably by tomorrow morning. I'll send that out. We do have live transcript available for anyone who's interested. You can just go to your Zoom bar. You might have to click that More button and then go to Captions. If you haven't already, I'm encouraging you all to introduce yourselves in the chat box. We'll be using the chat box today to interact. We're also going to be having times where we can come off mute and interact, ask questions. You do have the ability to raise your hand there with your little reactions. So I encourage you to explore all of that. And just a little bit about our agenda today. So we're just going to start off by looking at what is a river value statement and why are they important. And then we're going to get a little bit more into what should be included in a river values statement. And then towards the end, we're going to have some tips and we're going to share some resources that are helpful for crafting like a really strong and solid river values statement. So first, I'm going to start it off. I've got this short little video clip that I'm going to play here. It's about 50 seconds long. It's a little basic, but I think it'll like help make sure that we're all on the same page as far as going forward and talking about river values.
Most elite status of rivers, known as wild and scenic rivers, are designated by an act of Congress. This means they will be managed in free-flowing condition to protect and enhance the values that make these rivers special. The term is called Outstandingly Remarkable Values, or ORVs. After being designated, something called a Comprehensive River Management Plan must be completed. This plan decides 1. The boundary of the river's protected area. 2. The river's ORVs. 3. How these values will be protected. 4. Various recreation opportunities. 5. how future development and use will be managed. And 6, monitoring objectives to make sure the plan is working to protect the river's values.
All right. So if you're interested in watching that full video, I think it's like 2 minutes long. I can put a link to that in the chat here in a minute. You can also find that on YouTube. But just wanted to get us all up to speed on river values.
Most elite status of rivers.
And go to the next. And I'm going to go ahead now and pause, and I'm going to pass it over to co-presenter today, Dave Cernicek, to introduce himself and then take it away with talking about river values. Go ahead, Dave. Dave, are you able to hear me? All right, Dave, do we have you?
Yep. I don't hear anything.
All right, Dave, you can't hear me? All right. Hold on while we troubleshoot this, everyone. I appreciate your patience.
Can people hear me?
We can hear you.
I can't hear you at all, Angie. I'm sorry. Are we on my slide? Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is David Cernicek. I manage the Snake River Headwaters Wild and Scenic designation outside of Jackson Hole, Wyoming. 25 sections on 13 streams, shared by the Park Service, Fish and Wildlife, and the Bridger Teton National Forest. River values. River values are something, it's a term that's really important to understand. We often get this trinity kind of confused with outstandingly remarkable values, very different things. There's 3 things that make up river values: free flowing water, water quality, and outstandingly remarkable values, also known as ORVs. And those are your river values. So you're talking about all 3 things when you bring up river values. Free flowing condition. Oh, we can go forward, yeah. River's got to be free flowing. Existing or flowing in a natural condition without impoundment, diversion, straightening, riprapping, or other modification of the waterway. To be honest, there's wild and scenic rivers that do have impoundments on them. Most often it's irrigation, and it happens. It can still be designated as a river, eligible as a river, if it is, if there's minor impoundments that are historical, that are there on the day of designation. We don't allow more impoundments, but sometimes they exist. And as I said, especially irrigation diversions. They may also be part of your historic values, cultural values when it comes to like the old mill that's right by the river, that type of thing. Slide. Water quality is the next thing. Water quality is extremely important on Wild and Scenic River because it's our most quantifiable, qualifiable feature thing to fall back on when something's happening with our river, when something's proposed, when something's happening. Our water quality is going to tell us if something's amiss. We figure out what we have for water quality often before designation while we're writing our CRMP, our management plan, and we document those things. One thing, always try and find things that somebody else is monitoring, like the state, they spend their money on. Water quality is hard to do when we have bad budgets and things. And if you make your water quality evaluation too technical or expensive to go out and do, you may really miss your monitoring and not see when things are happening. One thing we're doing a lot in my designation is we're adding water temperature instruments to our stream gauges, mainly for climate change stuff when our river's getting too hot to boat. And we're seeing that from, we're seeing it on the river when we have algae that grows now just because I didn't know where it was coming from when it started, but it's a huge strip that glows and covers miles of river. The algae is native, but we've found out that our water is hotter and lower now as our climate changes. So it's had an impact on our water quality. And next is outstandingly remarkable values, and that's what we're talking about today. Certain selected rivers of the nation, which in their immediate environments possess outstandingly remarkable scenic, recreational, geologic, fish and wildlife, historic, cultural, and other similar values. These are really, really important. If you don't get this right, then you're in a mess. You got to find at least one outstandingly remarkable value for a river to become eligible to be a wild and scenic river. Slide. We have the qualities that I just named, but there's others that do come up. We do make variations on what our ORVs are sometimes. They can't be too far off the given track, but we can adapt our ORVs into something. For us, we have ecological values in with our wildlife values. So basic rivers, scenic values. Scenic values are, landscape elements or landform, vegetation, water, color, related factors that result in notable or exemplary visual features and or attraction. Sometimes there's seasonal variations. There's different things. These things all need to be, near the river. We can't claim scenic values of a set of mountains that is far away. Fisheries, what's going on underneath the water. We find that we have a lot of issues with fisheries, or people getting confused between the recreation ORV of great fishing and the fisheries ORV. This is something special that's in our stream that has to do with what species we have, the habitat, what is this a subspecies that's only found in this one place, that type of thing. What are fish, what exists when we are designated, and what's so special about those fish? Are they threatened? Are they special? Are they a management indicator species? Really important value, and not to be confused with fishing. Next, wildlife. A lot of stuff that's the same. Is there something in this river corridor that is unique? Is it a species that doesn't occur somewhere else? We're looking a lot at populations of animals and habitat. Lots of places, is it outstanding megafauna, outstanding charismatic megafauna? Is it, a migration that comes through that we need to keep open? Is it different things that you're not going to find somewhere else? Let's see, next. Cultural or prehistory. What is there that is significant from our past? This can be, early people's ruins. This can be the homestead that's on the side of the river, the mill, anything that is very unique to that place, and you're not going to find it somewhere else. There's not a lot of prehistory on my rivers around Jackson Hole, because we're in an environment that, gets minus 65-degree temperatures back in the day. And so not a lot of, our natives that came over here had a quick Sundance, did some hunting, and they got out of the valley quickly. Nobody tried to exist here for a long time. So our history and our cultural stuff is very brief when it comes to my management area. But yeah, what are the special things in that corridor that aren't in the next 10 corridors over? Next. Moving along. Did I already do fisheries? I think I did. Fisheries. Yeah, let's move on from that one. Let me catch up here. Why identify and document river values? It's really important. One, if you're the one who knows them, then it's going to be hard if you find a different job. We have to know what we're protecting and enhancing, and where they're located. And it can't be general stuff, or it's hard to defend. We can't say all the mountains are pretty. We can say, the Grovant River has, the scenic red hills, gray hills, and lavender hills as you move up the corridor that are outstanding. But naming those things out specifically gives us a better opportunity to protect them in the future. And we have to know what the heck we're managing for. A lot of times you'll get fisheries things that have nothing to do with your fishery that you're really protecting there, and you have to be careful about that. Just because your biologist likes it, it doesn't mean that it's an ORV, and it's not something if it's a different fish, we don't talk about it in section 7 or anything like that. We manage specifically for these values. So if we don't know them, we don't manage for them, and we can't defend them. Next. Why identify our primary context for identifying ORVs? We usually get them from a couple different places. Congress can send us some too, and surprise us. It's really, really hard if we don't have ORVs and we get a river designated. These ORVs first come up in our wild and scenic eligibility studies. We have streams of study. We're doing one now here because we're working on our forest plan, and that's part of doing this. We are evaluating over 700 different streams to see whether they have an ORV, and there's a lot to go through. Once again, has to be free flowing and possess one or more ORVs. And sometimes that ORV is hard to find, and sometimes your stream has a whole bunch of them. But when you have streams that are very close to each other, they're very similar, it's hard. But this is going to come back around in your CRMP, your management plan. From your eligibility study, they may be really raw ORVs, but that's when we really sit down and we start really talking about what is special here, what really is a scenery, how do we define it, what are we going to say about it, how are we going to write it up. Once again, because that's what we're managing for, and that's what is what we're defending as well. If there's a threat to my red hills, my lavender hills, or my gray hills, we have a starting place. If it's just all the pretty hills, it's going to be really hard to specifically say that's what we're going after. Next slide, please. Okay, this seems really simple, but it's not. ORVs must be river related, unique, rare, or exemplary, and within a region of comparison. Easy enough? Not that easy. People don't understand when you sit down to do this and sometimes you have some arguments over things. River related means it is connected to the river. It is part of the river. It's there because the river is there, and you're not going to find it anywhere else. Sometimes we say it's got to be within a quarter mile of the river. Once again, my beautiful mountain range 20 miles away is not going to qualify for this. River related values, it can be the river, it can be the recreation or people coming to this area just for this river because it is so special, because it offers some type of special recreation activity that you're not going to find in other places. We have the Snake River Canyon, which gets about 200,000 people in 2 months of time on 8 miles of whitewater. It's pretty important recreation and probably should be protected. Fish, waterfall, wetland riparian plants, anything, those types of things, they're all very near the river. They may be unique. Can you claim the hot spring that's a quarter mile off and over the hill? No, but somebody in the group might want to do that, and you have to argue with them about it not being river related. Our cultural sites, scenic views, geological formations, that's river related stuff. But yeah, there's nuances there that can get really confusing. One process, people were talking about protecting the fisheries value, the fisheries value being a non-native fish run that was hard to explain to them. It's like, we really can't have an ORV for a non-native fish. It doesn't work. Moving to the next slide. Let's see, river unique, rare, or exemplary. This is when things get real interesting. Unique, one of a kind, unequal. It's not going to be anywhere else. It's just so special. This is the one place to find it, except for maybe one other one many states away or something. Is it rare, uncommon, unusual, occurring infrequently? And that may be your cultural values. An exemplary, significant, conspicuous example among the best representative of its kind. It's something you're going to find in a textbook when you look it up in the dictionary as the example of what a river karst is, or some special type of formation or thing going on. rivers going underground, anything like that, that you're not going to find somewhere else. And rivers can be one or more of these things. Let's go to the next slide, but it does have to be defined, and it has to be within our region of comparison. And region comparison is something that can get a little strange. We pick those out, like when we're doing our CRMP, we set our regions for each of our ORVs, and they don't all have to be the same. And they need to be scaled at a appropriate level for the type of river being evaluated. We may set a region of comparison for fisheries in the watershed, but we may evaluate something in the state or in the ecosystem or in the HUC. Next slide. Example of the regions, as I said, management unit, the state, the hydraulic or physiographic unit, ecoregion, multi-state. It's going to be different for your wildlife or your fish and your recreation. They don't all have to be the same. They just have to be understandable and defendable. And it can be very strange. It can be nationally significant as well. And that's where we ended up quite a bit on the Snake River headwaters when it came to waterfall. The greater Yellowstone ecosystem has, you can't swing a dead cat without hitting a beautiful waterfall. They're everywhere. But some of our waterfalls at a national level, they're magnificent, and they are an ORV. But if we compare them with the next two over in Yellowstone, may not be Miss America in that competition. They're as I said, so many waterfalls. Regions can be associated with use, traditional indigenous use, populations served by recreation opportunities, species, range, that type of thing. But as I said, you don't have to set the region to be the exact same for all your ORVs. You just have to figure out which is the right region to evaluate for that given type of ORV. And as I said, they're different. Next slide, please. ORV determinations. They need to be unique, one of a kind, unequaled, as I said, rare, uncommon, unusual, and infrequently occurring, or exemplary, serving as a model, the best of its kind, the one you're going to find in the dictionary definition picture. We want to, with our determinations, we want to include the outside. We want to include other agencies. We want to include the public. They can actually really help us out there. Including our tribes is key. And we don't do this stuff without including our tribes. Sometimes they might not want to participate much, but we need to make all efforts to include them because there's so many things that are special about water and their ceremonies and places that if we don't know about them, they're not going to be an ORV. But we need to know about them, and we need to know what's special about them. And gather that information, do a really good job before you go to writing. And when you're discussing these things, talk about all these issues. Next slide. Okay, this is just a quick graphic here. When we're evaluating something, is the resource present in the river or the corridor? Yes or no? If it's not present in the corridor, it's probably not going to be ORV. Document that you looked at it and then move on. Yes. If we find that it is, then we move forward. We need to talk about, is the resource related to, or does it need river or corridor to exist? Is it river dependent? Is it there because of the river? No. Once again, not an ORV, most likely. Document it and move on. Yes. We are going to move forward. Is the resource rare or exemplary, unique, rare, or exemplary within the region of comparison? Same thing. No. Document that you looked at it, probably not going to be ORV. If it's yes, then document what it is, what the region of comparison in, and a very explicit, understandable explanation of why the resource is unique, rare, or exemplary in your findings. Is the ORV flow and or water dependent? No, once again, work is done. If it's yes, we go to writing. We have to describe the flows, water quality needed to protect the resource. Next slide, please. Uh, there's a lot of really good documents out there. There's a lot of matrix out there for when you actually do go through looking at your ORVs and coming up with it can be really interesting if you have a multi-segment designation like I manage. But document this stuff, talk about it, sit down, figure it out long before, write it all down in one big CRMP. It's really important that we get this stuff right and defendable and know what we're managing for. Angie, you want to take it over?
Yep, I've got it here, Dave, and maybe you want to try leaving and coming back in. You still can't hear me. All right. So we've looked and we now know like what river value statements are, river values are, why they're important, and why they need to be like super descriptive, right? So we're gonna take a look at some river value statements here, and we're gonna look at three different examples here in a minute. And as we're doing that, I want you to, jot down on a piece of paper in front of you or in the chat, just some different components that you might notice. And then also what information might be missing, like maybe what else could they include, or and if there is something missing, where might you be able to find this information? So we're just going to start looking critically at some of these river value statements. So I'm not going to read out this entire statement here, but this first example is from 1993. It's for the Maine West, Little and North Fork, Owyhee National Wild and Scenic River Plan, and it's part of their geology ORV description. And so I'm just gonna pause for a minute, be quiet, and let everyone read through this. And again, just jot down some things that you notice that are great, some things that might be missing. And then we'll share those out here in a second.
Angie, I'm back to hearing.
All right. Can you hear me, Dave?
Yes, ma'am.
Excellent. Awesome. Funny. Right now everyone's just reading through this example. I'm gonna give it another minute and then we'll talk about some things some observations about it. Well, I'm curious to hear what you all think. And just I like to think, that all these river statements can be improved upon, right? So I'm curious if anyone has any observations that they'd like to share in the chat, or you're welcome to come off mute and share any observations. Do people think this is, you'd say this is the best river value statement I've ever read?
Well, hey, this is Becky Blanchard, and maybe I'll throw this out there and perhaps expose my own ignorance, but I think as a non-specialist, it can be a little bit hard to parse the so what from this. So there's clearly like a ton of detail, which is really helpful, and I assume it's super helpful to a geologist. But for me as a non-geologist, it might be helpful to see something like, this is the best example of a benchlands, in the region, or, there's a place where you can clearly see, along this road cut, examples of this particular formation that, are a draw for geology courses, from throughout the region. They come here to see it. That kind of thing to help me see what here is really special.
Thanks for sharing, Becky. Yeah, and really making that connection to how it compares, in that region, right? I think that's something that might be improved upon in this statement, is really making that connection a little more solid. I see Emma also mentioned that in the chat. And then, like, again, kind of going back to like the, is it unique, rare, and exemplary? Is it river related? And here, I think also maybe being a little more explicit about how the geologic layers are visible because of the river's downcutting action, really connecting it to how is it river related as well. But I do agree too. It is hard to parse through some of this when you might not be a geologist, right? So good observations. We're going to take a look at another statement here. The second example, this is from 2015. It's a fisheries description from the Owyhee Canyonlands Wilderness and Wild and Scenic River Plan. And again, just as you're reading through this, if there's anything that stands out, anything that they did exceptionally well in this one. I know this one's a little longer, so give you a little extra time here. I see some comments in the chat coming in that right off the bat, it tells you why it's exemplary. And also, Anne mentioned it does a good job of defining why this specific population of bull trout is distinct from others. So that uniqueness. And as Dave said, this has the why. So this was an example that I thought did a really good job of kind of calling out that regional uniqueness and how it has enough water compared to some of the other streams to support the fish species. Any other observations? And again, you're welcome to come off mute and share or share in the chat. And I see Becky mentioned in the chat, I like that they seem to anticipate threats as well as opportunities to protect and enhance. Example, which is maintained by bank full flows. That tells me as a manager what I might need to look for in future project proposals, section 7 determinations, etc. Then Colleen said, I appreciate it calls out what would be caused by losing the species and the threats that exist elsewhere for it. And as Vincent said, yeah, it's easy to understand the importance here. All right, I've got one last example here. And Dave, I'm gonna kind of have you, after we have a second to read through it, share a little bit more, because I pulled this one from Bailey Creek on the Snake River headwaters in Wyoming. And this is a combined ecological and wildlife values description. And I forgot to put the year in here, but I want to say it's 2018 this was written. So I'll give everyone a couple minutes here to read through it. And again, if there's anything that stands out to you in this, feel free to share it in the chat or come off mute. All right. So Dave, do you want to kind of just just maybe share how you guys did combine it and any points around this description?
Really positive part about this description is it talks about exactly what's there. Once again, it's descriptive. Doesn't necessarily, call things out specifically as well as the Oahe did on why it is unique, exemplary, etc. But what it has done is it's told us what's there and what's important there. Any of these things can be an indication if they disappear that I have a problem on this segment. If we, what happens if we quit seeing beavers or our trumper spawns or any of that stuff? It's important because we know it was there and it's something that we should be paying attention to and protecting. If something's off, if something's going on, we need to look into that. We need to figure out why it's gone, why it's missing. Could be climate, but these are all the things that make Bailey Creek really special. It's one of our only two of the 25 sections in the designation that flows out of a lake. That's probably in our other descriptions, but this is good in the sense that I know even if I show up tomorrow, I know what's supposed to be important there without having even hiked up it. Really pretty little creek flows into the Snake River just above the Snake River Canyon section, and this is well done, and I know what I need. I know what I need to make sure is still there on an ongoing basis. If something's putting it out of balance, then we need to figure out what actions we need to take.
And I saw a question in the chat come in, Dave, asking if those are native trout species.
Absolutely. We would not bring in any non-native species into what we protect. If they're there, a lot of wild and scenics are trying to get rid of their non-natives. And that's one of the big discussions we have going on is the fish barriers in wild and scenic rivers because they are an impoundment. Adding some, we're protecting the fishery, we're trying to save our native fishery, but we're also putting an impoundment at the river that is at the core of the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, a problem to impound our wild and scenic river. So absolutely, they've got to be our native fish. We can't have substitutes. We can't have something a bunch of hillbillies dumped in from the back of a truck because they thought it was better sporting fish. That's something that's bad, and that's something that could throw us off in what we're managing for. So yes.
And then I saw another question just asking out of curiosity, how long is Bailey Creek?
It's probably 2 to 3, maybe 4 miles. It's very short. It's mainly hiked up from the river for fishing. At the confluence, it actually has some stuff that I wish we'd included in our cultural values. It's this for the snake, especially. We did have characters who lived down there. We do have a large transport for troops, this big, what we call the tank that sits down there, that was part of the past of a gold mining attempt in a place that's not really good to gold mine, but beautiful little creek, worth taking the hike up, and great fishing on it.
Cool. Then just a couple other observations I saw come in the chat, that this statement is quantitative as well as qualitative, and that it paints a great picture of the interconnectedness of the natural resources found in this section. However, I did see a couple questions come in. Stephanie asked, should you include information on the impact of what would happen if these resources were threatened?
I think you're onto something there, Stephanie. It's really, as I said, that the Oahe description is a lot better of saying, this is the only thing there. This needs to be protected. If, we do, in our plan, we'll have trigger points on if things happen, if something were threatened, of when we take action as the river managers. But yeah, if something is threatened, we need to go back to the drawing board. We need to investigate what's going on that has changed the game down there, what's put it out of balance. And we need to figure out whether that's part of our changing climate, or it's being caused by hand to man, anything like that. I don't know what the answer to this is, just because we don't know what the resource is. And, we'd really have to discuss what actions we should take. We should take, the fewest interventions as possible in managing our rivers. But there may be something that's called for here, and there's something that we need to intervene with to try and bring that balance back that we had on the day of designation. The final question, what development pressures are there? Bailey Creek is relatively safe. It's on the non-highway side of the Snake River. It's I believe it is in a roadless area, but it is in the Wyoming range. The Wyoming range does have some unused oil leases that could come to life at any given time that could really change that. There's a lot of pressure in Wyoming, especially when it comes to oil and gas development. And that, I think, would probably be the only development pressure. Otherwise, it's a relatively safe stream. It does get a lot of recreation. Sometimes people ride in from the other side and get up to the lake. Water quality could go bad there from recreation use, something like that could throw things. But development, oil and gas definitely would be a game changer, possibly, if it was not done well. Doesn't mean it can't be done in the Wyoming range. It just needs to be done correctly. Yes, there is motorized recreation on the Grays River side, where there's better access, where people can access it better than having to walk 4 miles up a trail from the Snake River. And so I have not been up to see what the motorized recreation aspect is, but I know people can get back there, and I know it's possible. I don't think it's a popular thing to do, but it is something that we keep in mind and pay attention to, or I should pay better attention to. Good question.
Awesome. Well, I'm loving all the chats and the comments the questions and comments being shared in the chat. This is great, and keep questions coming, because this is your time to ask these questions. So next up, we are going to look at, so we looked at some statements. Now we're going to look at writing great statements. And really, one of the main things that we want to encourage is don't start from scratch necessarily. There's a lot of resources out there. You've got study reports that have been done where hopefully value statements have been written. You've got other river value descriptions as examples, and I'll show you something here in a second where you can find those easily. And then a river values worksheet that I'm also going to share here in a second. But first, I just want to point out, if you go to the updated rivers.gov website here, and you're at their main landing page, I encourage you to scroll all the way to the bottom. And you're going to see management plans, and you can click view plans. This is a collection of all management plans. This is by rivers in alphabetical order. Another way I encourage, and once you're here, you can like go look up these different management plans. See examples of river values statements. However, you never know, like this was written in 2012, some were written in the 90s, some in the 80s. So another way to find the most up-to-date or most recently done plans as examples is go back to just rivers.gov. Oops. Go down and go to view documents here, just to the right of management plans. Once you're there, you can select the type of document that you want to look up, and I just go down to comprehensive river management plan. You can also choose if you want to search by agency or by state. Maybe if you're working in the Forest Service, you want to look up other Forest Service plan examples, or Bureau of Land Management, Fish and Wildlife, Park Service, however you want to do that, or other states. Hit apply, and then here they are all listed by publication date. So you can see where the most recent ones are, and maybe you go look at some river value descriptions as examples from plans that were more recently done, as opposed to ones that are on page 4, right? I just wanted to point that out because this is a new way that they've been organizing the documents on rivers.gov, and it's pretty helpful to be able to come search through all the plans like this. All right. Also, I'm gonna share some links here to some other examples. So let's see, actually. What I'm going to share next is a link to a worksheet that's been used to help people write descriptions and figure out if things are ORVs or river values and how to best describe them. So I've just put in a worksheet into the chat. I'm going to click on that link here and open it up. And once it loads here, what we'll see is this is just like a very basic sheet. And Dave, if you want to explain, also feel free to step in. You should be able to download a copy of this, actually, and use it. It kind of goes through some of the definitions, the purpose of this worksheet, again, explaining what outstandingly remarkable values are, a little guide to helping fill out this worksheet, but it's a great way to help you kind of gather some information. So you see here, this is related to scenery. And if you're looking at a scenery ORV, you can help, identify the river segment, and has like a little overview of things to consider around scenery ORVs. So considering the landscape elements in landform, vegetation, water, color, related factors, the diversity of views. So these are kind of getting into things that are related, real specific to scenery. And by going through these prompts, it's going to help you kind of get all that information there to then help you write this river values statement. You can see there's kind of like 1 page per different values here going into wildlife. Again, it has little prompts just specific to wildlife ORV descriptions. So thinking about the carrying capacity of a variety of wildlife habitats, or the winter range, summer range, transition zones, travel corridors. Looking at the size and vigor of the species. Again, coming down, we've got a fisheries worksheet. There's a worksheet for scientific discoveries. There's a worksheet around some naturalness. So this is just some ideas, some prompts. Curious if people have used these before. Would love to hear if they've been useful. So feel free to share any reactions if you've used these worksheets before, or if you think this might be something that could help you.
This was part of a special process put together by the National Park Service. It was really well done. We were planning alongside Yellowstone and Grand Teton and the National Elk Refuge when we did our CRMP, and so it kind of was a check the box, fill in the box type of process that was really straightforward and seemed almost too easy to do. But this document comes from, it actually was a 3-day workshop that we had with specialists from all the agencies, outside agencies, experts, all of our specialists on forests, that type of thing. And we all had to sit down at tables in groups divided by ORV and go through writing this stuff down. Some stuff was kept, some stuff was chucked. Some people had bad ideas, some people had great ideas. Some people wrote things really well, some did not. But sitting down, filling things out of why you think it's special, what the ORV is, and coming up with a great description of it is really, really valuable. We definitely had some dissension in the ranks. And, as I said, we had somebody who wanted to include a warm spring that wasn't really close to the river or river dependent in any way. And, talking her down off that ledge took a little bit, but sometimes people want to throw in extra things to protect, and that's normal. But we went through all this. We'd make periodic stops, we'd recollect things and discuss them. But stuff really, from this, we wrote what is our ORV document for the designation, at least for the Forest Service. And it is just very, very clear, and it's just about our ORVs. And that was before we put pen to paper on the CRMP, was getting our ORVs done, set, straight, defensible, well written, well described. And that once that was complete, it was almost just a cut and paste into the CRMP, the management plan. Once we were 100% solid, everything was unique, exemplary, etc. It was river related. Once it met all the filters and we all agreed to it, then we wrote it down and tried to include as much as possible. And that's where all those things come in, like with the different geological features. Not everyone thinks of all of them, but everyone thinks of all of them together usually and gets them out on the table. You'll find things you didn't think about that somebody else thought about that needs to be in there. So this was a really, really good process. I don't have all the documents from it, but I can probably find them. But really neat system for getting through writing a CRMP, and we were one of the test subjects for the Park Service, and I don't know if they still use it, but it was a really, really good system.
And Kara made a great point in the chat that there's also agency guidance. So depending on which agency is in charge of managing stretch of river, maybe it's co-managing too. There's agency guidance to look at for each of the agencies, which also can do a great job of laying out what needs to be included. Yeah, and then there's also the interagency Wild and Scenic Rivers Coordinating Council white paper on the Wild and Scenic Rivers study process, which also has some great descriptions of ORVs and what need to be included when describing them. In addition to all of these places to start, there's a bunch of questions that you can ask related, and I'm not going to necessarily read through every single one of these questions because it's meant to really just be another tool for you to reference. So we will be sending out these slides afterwards to everyone, as well as posting them, a link to these slides in the description of the video that we send out and post on YouTube. But for example, when thinking about free flowing and describing the free flowing condition, here's 8 different questions that you can ask that can really help you get into writing a detailed description related to free flowing, perhaps, for example, number 5, if human uses of water deplete the flow, what percentage of flows is depleted? So kind of thinking through some of these things that might not initially come to your mind. Equally, there's a whole list of questions that you can ask when it comes to thinking about water quality. And as well as Dave has mentioned, some other resources that you can draw on, like state programs. But like number 2, does the stream meet state water quality standards? What parameters exceed water quality standards? So just some additional questions that you can use to help you ask questions related to water quality and write better descriptions. And then lastly, some questions related to ORVs. And again, it's really hammering in, how is the value related to the river? How is it unique, rare, or exemplary, and within the region of comparison? Kind of as someone mentioned earlier in the chat, looking at both quantitatively and qualitatively, or why would someone take special note of that as maybe you're not a specialist and someone reading over it, what would they get out of that? So just, again, some more questions. And here on this last question, number 8, it asks, what is the current condition and trend of that value? I think one thing to pay attention to is when documenting ORVs, I don't know if we've said this yet, Dave, is that it needs to be documented from the condition on the date of designation is really what you're looking at. But that's a really important thing to note. And then here, just some additional considerations. Again, just kind of getting into those details. Make sure that you're adequately describing things. So if you're talking about recreation, is it all types of recreation? Is it motorized? Is it non-motorized? Is it a mix of both? Are there different seasons for the different types? Keep in mind specific criteria for the ORV, so don't just incorporate the study report. The study report might have been done a long time ago. Maybe they didn't go in that depth when they were writing the descriptions for the study report. So don't just rely on that. It might be a good place to start. It might not be a good place to start. It would just take reading through and seeing what the descriptions look like. And then again, really making that link between the resource uses, values, water quality, free flow condition, ORVs in your document. So this is going to help you in the future when you're developing management actions and you're really working to protect and enhance the water quality, free flow, and ORVs. Anything else you want to add to this, Dave?
No, I think you pretty well summed it up very well. But yeah, the better you document this stuff, the better you explain this stuff, the more defensible you are when something comes along. And saying what's there on the day of designation is the most important. That's the snapshot that we compare everything to. A lot of people that don't understand wild and scenic confuse it so much with wilderness, where we're managing people and we're more talking about keeping a resource the way it was at the beginning of time. For wild and scenic rivers, we're doing this snapshot in time. What was valuable on the day of designation? What were the things that were called out on the day of designation? What condition were they? What were the outfitters? What were your DOT may have done a project on the side of the river that is riprap, and that may be in your designated section. Doesn't mean it can't be designated, and it doesn't mean it doesn't take it out of consideration for designation, but we need to address that and talk about highway projects, and all forward projects after that need to end up not being a massive riprap pile of rocks anywhere we have a concern, but they need to be well done well done repairs or projects, water resource projects that are of benefit to the river and not as destructive as riprap. But it's what things we're at on that day of designation that we compare all things back to on whether we're doing a good job or not. Wild and scenic never means we get rid of stuff just because we got it designated. Getting rid of stuff that was there on the day of designation when we found it special enough to designate as a special stream to be protected forever. It needs to remain unless in the future it causes some type of problem. That's the only time we'll intervene and go, we need to take this away or make this not happen or not allow this anymore. But otherwise, if that ATV road was running along your recreational river section or 2-track, it was there when you designated it. Doesn't mean the day you designate it, you can rip that thing out and say it was for the benefit of wild and scenic management. One other thing that's totally a tangent is after designation, people always think that anything within a 10-mile radius of your wild and scenic river is anything bad that happened is related to your wild and scenic designation, mainly because they don't understand wild and scenic management. But you will get people that are like, did that road, in the next state get closed because of wild and scenic or this bad thing happened? But it's just that day of designation stuff that you guys you have to sum up and document so well of what was there, what you're protecting, why you're protecting it. And, that's really critical. But yeah, we don't take things away the minute after designation. Some stuff remains. We have powerboats on some rivers that drive people crazy. They were there before it was wild and scenic. They remain. But I think that's all I have to add.
Thanks, Dave. And I know that we've got a lot of really knowledgeable people on this call as well. So I encourage any of you who have written river value statements or worked on developing CRMPs, or maybe are just monitoring and managing a wild and scenic river, to share any other additional considerations that you've learned over the years. So you can do that in the chat. You can come off mute. I won't put anyone on the spot right now, though. But I guess to get us thinking again, I've got 3 statements here, and this is an example from the Rogue River in Oregon. This particular stretch that we're looking at right here is a recreational segment with a recreation ORV. So encourage you to read through these 3 statements and think about which statement is the best. And again, as I mentioned previously, every statement can improve, right? However, given these 3 statements, which one do you think is the best? And I'm gonna launch a poll to keep us just thinking and interacting, because I know we're like an hour in and it's lunchtime for some people, or post lunchtime and you start to nap. And as you start to vote, I see some votes coming in here. Maybe think about why you chose that answer. Maybe give it another 30, 40 seconds here. All right, I'm gonna give it about 10 more seconds and then I'm gonna close this poll and I will share the results of the poll. And then would love to have some discussion around or hear from a couple people of like why they chose the answer they did. But let's end this and I'm gonna share out the results. So looks like we had about 68% of you choose number one, statement number one, and about 32% of you choose statement number three. No one chose statement number two. I'm curious if anyone wants to share why they did not choose statement two. Feel free to put it in the chat or come off mute. Why did you not choose number two? Because no one here chose number two. So
Seems like number two is the most generic of the three statements, I would say.
yeah, not very detailed, not very
Yeah.
descriptive. Thanks, Emma. All right. Well, the statement that we had identified as best was number one, and would love to hear from people who chose number one and who chose number three, why they chose the number that they did. And I
Let's
know
put
it
all three
takes,
back.
oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh, just put all three back up for a second
Oh,
for
yeah.
people.
I see some comments. Number two focuses on land-based features. Statement number two undercuts itself almost with plenty of other public lands exist. I agree. It's not very, doesn't make it sound very unique or rare.
I can't tell if expensive homes are part of the ORV or not. You know, squishing these together, they all have something there, but only one calls out you know, rafting and fishing, boating and fishing, and talks about the whitewater. The others bring up other recreation, which is worthwhile to do if they are part of your ORV, and it's informative. But it's interesting that one has camping, you know, they all have different things that they bring up, and not all three share all those features. And you'd really have to question, you know, what is the ORV necessarily between these three? Does it include, you know, does it include big game hunting or primitive camping? Because there, you know, three different statements call out multiple different things.
Right. I see Kara mentioned, I appreciate that number three quantifies visitation a bit, but number one is more descriptive of specific elements of the recreation ORV. And I agree. I think, you know, like number three, I like it does include like recreational gold panning, and that's not really mentioned in number one, but that is part of some recreation on the Rogue River.
That's normally something that we'd probably not have going on a wild and scenic section
Okay.
traditionally,
Tradition.
just because we're digging in the bed of the river.
Right.
I liked number three. I'll just speak up and come on camera. Yeah, I'm a big supporter of numbers. So the fact that it has the number of visitors, I think any kind of data like that, this seemed, at least three seemed kind of Forest Servicey, which is my agency. And then I like that it included, and I'm new to this, so maybe not discerning it with the best eye, but I like that it calls out these adjacent opportunities with rafting and fishing maybe as the basis. But like if camping is part of that, or day use areas, boat ramps, some like developed or dispersed recreation. So that's why I was in the minority of choosing three at least.
It definitely calls out a lot more, and but it's still, I still can't tell what our ORV is. Is it just, you know, between these three statements, it seems like our ORVs are three different ORVs when it comes to activities. And two is more informational, of course, and may not have useful information, but it does have all the different uses that are going on. But the question is, are those part of the ORV or not? Because you can't tell between the statements.
Yeah, and this is a great exercise to see what is a quality statement and to focus on the specific actual opportunity at hand. So I appreciate your input.
You know, 3 calls out facilities and things like that, which is really nice.
Yeah. And I think number 3 also talks a little bit about seasonality. I'm not sure if that's, you know, as we're saying, more description the better, but it'd be really interesting to write a whole new statement for this based off of, you know, kind of these 3 and like different pieces that you might take from each, add those numbers in like Colleen mentioned, or really highlighting those recreation opportunities. So I think it's good. Everyone's starting to look critically at these ORV statements and realize that a lot of times they can always be improved.
And
So,
only
oh, go ahead.
only one covers that there's motorized recreation on the river, motorized boats. Traditionally, we don't very often don't have motorized boating, and it would be important to call it out if it's one of our rivers like this that has traditionally always had this going on, and people needed it to access their homes or homesteads, that type of thing. As I said, we don't get rid of it on the day of designation because we don't like it. If it's part of the fabric that made it a wild and scenic river, it's important to keep and call out. People who aren't motorized get very upset with motorized, and they ask a lot of questions. And that, once again, it's something that has to be really, really well documented in your CRMP, why it's there, what levels it's at, and how are we going to tell if motorized is going off grid and creating problems, doing things that weren't being done before the date of designation. So that's important in itself, is just to call out that, calling out things that are unique, like gold panning and motorized, are really important, because they're not standards. Not all rivers have those, and there needs to be a really good reason why you have them, and it needs to be spelled out, because that's the first thing that people will bash down your doors trying to get rid of. Once you have boats protected it, yeah, how can you protect a river that has motorized boats? It's like the river had motorized boats on the day of designation, they remain until they start doing damage or tearing something up. Then you need to reassess what things are. You can change this stuff. I think I saw a question about that. Our ORVs can get changed or amended. We can rewrite plans as well, but yeah, we have to respect what's there on the date of designation. And yeah, those 2 are very unique things for that section river. We don't have recreational gold panning or motorized. It's important to be called out if you do.
Thanks, Dave. Well, now we do have about 15 minutes left. Can open it up to some questions. So again, you can put them in the chat or you can come off mute. And I did see that question earlier that I kind of gloss over from Kara, just saying, any advice for dealing with ORVs that are poorly described in finalized CRMPs? I don't know if you want to expand on that a little more. Do you have any advice?
I haven't personally ever dealt with that in all my years, but if things need to be amended, if things need to be repaired or whatever, that is a possibility. One thing we had issues with was what we came up with for monitoring. And, we did not traditionally, we do this as agencies, we promise all this monitoring that we don't do when our budgets go down and we don't have resources or people. We went back and we changed kind of what our monitoring is on our rivers, on some of our rivers, just because what we came up with may have been boneheaded or really hard to do, and really hard to keep our promise to the public that we're going to monitor these rivers. If counting the number of cars in an obscure trailhead that's far away and hard to access 3 times a year, 4 times a year, whatever, maybe that's not as good a thing as finding something that's done, a water quality thing that the state does every year and goes back 300 years or whatever, and it's always going to be there. From experience, it's done every year. Somebody else is doing. It's real easy to get that off the internet and put in your monitoring report. So yeah, things can change. It's difficult. Nobody wants to do it, but it is possible.
And Matt did ask what is the
Yeah,
process for amending
I've
the
seen that.
agreement?
I don't fully know. I don't want to give you an answer because I'd be lying to you, Matt. I have not done that before. I'm sure it's difficult and nobody wants to do it, but possible. I don't know the process. I'd have to get back to you on that.
While folks are thinking about questions, you'd mentioned monitoring. It's interesting. I've been seeing a lot more like citizen science monitoring as well. That's been helping out not only like I've seen partnerships with adventure scientists for wild and scenic river water quality monitoring, but I recently saw I can't remember the name of the group, but I'll try to find it and share it with everyone. But it's essentially these signposts with QR codes, and they ask folks to scan the QR or take a photo from this spot and then scan the QR code and upload the photo to that spot. And they're collecting all these photos of the exact same area throughout different times of the day, different times of the year. Water levels are different, and kind of monitoring. This is more for like a scenic type thing, but having people help monitor in that way, or having people check in using apps. So it's been interesting how the public is getting involved in helping with that.
Citizen science can be really helpful and useful and save you a lot of money. Tough part is just to make sure it is the information that you need and will continue to be collected. Sometimes we have citizen science as a project that they do 2 years or 1 year or one report or whatever. We don't need that. It's good to take more snapshots in time to compare to the day of designation. But it's also, losing my train of thought here. It's really important that we get the things we need on an ongoing basis. To me, I'm going to latch onto something that if the citizen science is something that's going to happen every year, if one of my river-based NGOs like the Snake River Fund is taking on this whole project for their organization and taking it out of my workload, I'm super happy because they're dependable and I know they will continue it every year. And so we'll have that data to draw back on. Going back, getting in trouble, then having to, it's like, oh yeah, we have some great science from 10 years ago for 2 years isn't going to be as helpful as having my NGO take it over and make sure it gets done every year. And they even pay attention if something's changing and they write it up. That's the best thing I can have going. And you do have groups that care about your river that are happy to step in and help if they're asked, and you can define it and make it possible for them. You don't want to make it super expensive or anything, but assigning those things out as long as they're happening is a great way to do it. If it's dependable information you're taking in, it makes your management go a lot better if there's fewer things that you have to juggle at a time. Very often with our funding, you may be the lone river manager doing all this stuff, and you're just doing trauma care to your wild and scenic river. You're dealing with the problems because that's all you have time for. If you can get all these other things going on that especially your CRMP promised the public that we're going to be doing, you're a lot better off. And that monitoring is so critical if we're going to say there's a problem and we're going to defend it. If we haven't been monitoring anything for 10 years and then we start saying there's a problem with something changed, it's going to be a lot harder because we don't have the data to back it up. So, be careful with citizen science, but it can be really, really helpful. Just do it right.
I see Becky asked, and I'm going to open this up to everyone who's here, but curious to know if you have any examples to recommend or experience/thoughts to share about how to describe Jedi-related aspects of river recreation. So that's justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. For example, a river that is beloved and well used as a place to gather/refresh by local residents, including many low-income people of color, multi-generational families, etc. And again, I'm opening this up to anyone here. It's a great question, Becky.
For me, the most important thing is to do programs where we're getting kids outside and down rivers. you know, those are the people who, you know, kids are the minds that we can change, that we can inspire, and we can change their lives by introducing them to a river. And that's a huge impact that uh, can lead to people who even want to work for us in the future. Uh, getting them while they're kids and they're young and they're influenceable is really cool, because it just really opens up their eyes. And it, to me, that's one of the biggest changes I can make in Jedi related aspects, is getting the kids that are sitting in apartments all summer. I live in a very expensive place. We have kids doing nothing all summer that will never ever step foot on a river unless we take them down it. If we can work with the schools and make it part of their science program, my whitewater outfitters will all offer boats and guides and buses and trailers and drivers free of charge, as long as it doesn't come out of their allocation. But to me, that's one of the most important things we can do in getting groups to the river. If I can get the kids down, the parents they'll bring their parents back. We can, you know, it changes things, and it inspires that young mind and brings up that interest in river and that passion for them. And they may never get back on a whitewater boat or anything like that, but it'll always be a different place for them. And to me, that's one of the biggest impacts I can make personally.
And I'm trying to think of some examples, Becky, related to, for example, I just recently listened to an older episode of River Radius podcast about the Gila River, which is being proposed as a wild and scenic river, for wild and scenic river designation. And during that, it was interesting because they interviewed multi-generational families that had been living along the Gila River and how they use the river as a place of community gathering. And I have to be honest, I've not gone through recently and read what some of the potential river values that have been identified are, and if that's been captured in it. But I'm curious to go check those out and see if that was captured in like a historical or cultural ORV description. Any other questions? We might have room for one or two more. Well, while you're thinking, I just want to kind of plug our next session is going to be on March 20th, about a month from today. And we're going to be looking at the fundamentals of the Wild and Scenic River study process. So a lot of people know that is like eligibility, right? And what makes a river eligible for inclusion into the Wild and Scenic River system. So I hope to see you all there. Also, a new series that's not related to wild and scenic necessarily, but could have some intersections with it, is we're going to be having a 4-part series starting next month around hydropower insights. And we're going to be looking at projects, energy markets, trends in licensing and relicensing. And so our first session is going to be on March 13th at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, and we're going to be looking at some hydropower projects 101. So this is a great series for those who are looking to possibly get more involved around hydropower licensing and relicensing. So thank you all again. I'll stick around here if there's any last questions. And again, I'll be sending out the resources that we've shared today. When you leave today's meeting, it'll direct you to a survey. I really encourage you to go fill out that survey and let us know what you thought about this session. We do take that feedback into account as we're forming our next sessions and our series is in the future. So thank you all again for being here.
Yeah.